April is the most adventurous month. Hello, I'm Tim and I have too many books. This video is for the April event, Spring into Adventure, where we delve into the world of adventure books. This is a BookTube event hosted by Book Time with Elvis, The Literate Texan, Sean D. Standfast, Big Hard Books, Mystery and Mayhem, and Another Bibliophile Reads. The idea of this event is to read an adventure book of under 200 pages in the first week of April, then read a more regular adventure book in the second week of April, discover an adventure in a different medium in the third week of April, and then read some non-fiction in the last week of April. As ever with these events, I'm not entirely sure I'll be able to do that, but I'll try to do something. One of the first things it would be useful to do is come up with a definition of what we mean by an adventure book. I have to say, when I first heard about this event, I couldn't help being reminded of an old saying or an old poster that I once saw. The Library of Congress in the United States has a Vietnam War protest poster which says, "Join the army, travel to exotic and distant lands, meet exciting and interesting people, and kill them." I'm not entirely sure that that's the best definition of adventure, but it did unfortunately pop into my head. I think the best thing to say about what an adventure is it is a person or group of people who go to a strange place to explore it and indeed to meet some interesting people, but that they are in some way cut off from all the comforts of society. They have to rough it on their own. The interesting people they might meet may or may not want to feed them and may or may not want to kill them, but the adventure is all about a certain self-reliance on our heroes and heroines. When I first looked into adventure books, I discovered that an awful lot of the classic ones are written before about 1920. And I wondered, well, maybe I should pair a classic adventure book with something a little bit more contemporary, and certainly something that might involve some actual women in it, because they're not called boys' own adventures for nothing. Also, modern adventures can look at a much more personal journey of discovery, where you find out things closer to home, but you are revealing them to yourself. If you want a recommendation for the third week, it's probably the animated movie Up, which of course has an adventure into a plateau in South America, but also another adventure, which we find out right at the end, which is much, much more personal and much more touching. So what I'll do is give you some old-time classic adventures and pair them up with more recent books that you might like, hopefully. We start with Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. This was published in 1719. This is a classic story of a man marooned on an island. It's not a desert island. It's actually full of things that can sustain life, and he makes a very good go of it. One of the things about it, of course, that makes it a little bit difficult these days is the treatment of Friday. This is very much a master-servant relationship, and of course he gives him a name, Friday, instead of using his actual name, because Friday is a person. It's also one of those books where there are sequels to the book, but nobody's really ever gone into that. There are further adventures of Crusoe and Friday. I'm pairing this with Andy Weir's The Martian from 2011. I think this has got a lot to do with an old, rather creaky film called Robinson Crusoe on Mars, which starred Adam West. In The Martian, we have Mark Watney, who accidentally gets left behind on Mars and has to survive the tribulations until somebody comes back to rescue him. It's a very entertaining read, although there are people who've pointed out quite a lot of scientific problems with it, including the author Andy Weir himself. The next book is Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift from 1726. In this book, Lemuel Gulliver goes on a number of voyages to Lilliput, where he is 12 times bigger than the inhabitants, to Brobdingnag, where he is 12 times smaller than the inhabitants, to the flying land of Laputa, and finally to the land of the Houyhnhnms and the Yahoos. Most adaptations of Gulliver's Travels only deal with either the voyages to Lilliput or to Brobdingnag. Now, one of the things about Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels is that it is an immensely satirical book. He is poking fun at all sorts of aspects of society. whether it is the Protestant Catholic debate between Lilliput and Blefusco in the first journey, or the insistence on science in the voyage to Laputa. I wanted to pair this up with Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness from 1967. In this book, a traveller from Earth goes as an envoy to a planet where the people are androgynous and at certain periods of time can change into one gender or the other. In this book, we can argue that Ursula K. Le Guin is looking into the society in the 1960s and making a commentary upon it. The next adventure book is The Last of Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper. This is the second of his Leatherstocking tales, featuring a character who tends to get called Hawkeye in most adaptations, but in the book, of course, is called Natty Bumppo. These Leatherstocking tales take place during the 7 Years' War, known as the French and Indian War in the United States, and take place mostly in the northeastern United States. I've paired this up with The Blooding of Jack Absolute by C.C. Humphreys from 2004. This is the second of C.C. Humphreys' Jack Absolute books. Jack Absolute is a character from Richard Brinsley Sheridan's play, The Rivals. In the first Jack Absolute book, called Jack Absolute, we see the hero during the American Revolution as a sort of James Bond figure. But The Blooding of Jack Absolute is set some years before, during the French and Indian War, yes, mostly in Canada, where C.C. Humphreys is based. Our next book is Moby Dick by Herman Melville from 1851, a masterwork about the hunting of a great white whale. I've paired this with Richard Adams's book Shardik from 1974. Now, with Richard Adams, it is always tempting to pick Watership Down, which is a great adventure book on its own. But Shardik has elements which I think are moderately similar to the hunt for a great white whale. In Shardik, a great bear from the northern lands finds itself on an island where the locals take it to be a god. And Shardik the bear god inspires them to conquer the empire that had previously been controlling them. But, Shardik is really just a bear, not really a god. And much like Moby Dick is just trying to get on with its life. The next book is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne from 1870. In this book, Captain Nemo is fighting against the terrestrial world and the corruption he sees inside it as he travels the distance of 20,000 leagues whilst mostly under the sea in his submarine, the Nautilus. I've paired this one with A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers from 2014. This details a fairly mismatched crew of a spaceship who come together as they explore various different planets on their journey to the small angry one. Next we have Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson from 1883, a classic adventure of pirates and treasure with Long John Silver and Jim Hawkins. I've paired this with Desmond Bagley's first book, The Golden Keel, from 1963. This is about a boat designer who teams up with a group of people trying to smuggle some of Mussolini's looted gold out of Italy and across the Mediterranean. The group read for Spring into Adventure is She by H. Rider Haggard. But I've chosen an earlier H. Rider Haggard book, King Solomon's Mines from 1885. King Solomon's Mines is where we first meet H. Rider Haggard's hero, Alan Quatermain, who goes on to star in a lot of other books, even meeting up with She at one point. I'm pairing this up with The Seventh Scroll by Wilbur Smith. This is the second of Wilbur Smith's ancient Egypt books, although this one is set in a more contemporary time. Wilbur Smith's ancient Egypt books are a great read, although they are somewhat variable in quality. But the first two books are very solid. The first book, River God, is about a slave come inventor come priest called Taita, as he takes a group of Egyptians fleeing from the Hyksos down the Nile and eventually discovering its source in the Mountains of the Moon. The Seventh Scroll picks up the story because they have discovered Taita's account of his adventures and think they found the location of a pharaoh's tomb in modern-day Ethiopia. The next book is The Virginian by Owen Wister from 1902. This arguably is the first Western put to print. And it has to be said that the heroes are a little bit too capable, a little bit too good at everything, a little bit too perfect in the way that he gets things done. But it's still a very good read. I've paired this up with Red Country by Joe Abercrombie from 2012. Red Country is a story from Joe Abercrombie's first law world, in which we meet some of the characters from the previous books, but we don't necessarily need to know anything about the previous books. This is an Oregon Trail style adventure with a fair bit of fantasy and madness thrown into it. It's a very entertaining read. The next book is The Riddle of the Sands by Erskine Childers from 1903. Now, you could say that this is a spy thriller rather than an adventure, although I have to say I do tend to think of it as an adventure. We have a character who is contacted by an old school friend and thinks he's going on a yachting trip around the Frisian Islands on the North Sea coast of Germany. But, of course, we discover that there's more to it than that, and there's some German skullduggery about. As we said, Erskine Childers is a fascinating character, and this is a very, very good book. I'm pairing this with a fairly random book, Christine Mangan's Tangerine from 2018. I'm not absolutely sure about this book because I have to say it's a fairly random choice. I was looking for a book where somebody gets embroiled with their old friend in a fairly exotic location, and this seems to fit the bill, although it's probably more of a thriller than anything else. It is about an American woman and her husband who are living in Tangiers, and the woman's old school friend who comes into their lives and disrupts things for them. We end with a non-fiction choice, and the most obvious one to me is Journey Without Maps by Graham Greene from 1936. Now, in this book, Graham Greene travels through Liberia in the company of his cousin. And I have to say, when I read this book, I thought his cousin was behaving slightly oddly at times, because I'd missed the part in the book where Graham Greene had said that his cousin was 23 and called Barbara. In 1938, Barbara Greene wrote her own account of the same journey. It is now published as Too Late to Turn Back, and it sounds like a very entertaining read. So those are my choices for springing into adventure. It's not quite what everybody else has wanted to do, but I hope it will be of interest. Bye-bye.